Mr. Dettelbach, what were you trying to hide? On the raid on March 19th at Mr. Malinowski's house, disabled the doorbell camera, cut electricity to the house, and you didn't wear body cameras. What were you guys trying to hide?
Mr. Chairman, we're not trying to hide things. In fact,
Sure seems like it.
You
guys cut electricity to the house?
After the...
Oh, that's a question.
I'm trying to answer. After the... Okay, if there's no question, that's fine. I'm sorry.
No, that is a question. Did you?
After the incident, we, along with the Little Rock Police, called for an independent investigation being done by the Arkansas State Police and the local prosecutor.
No,
That's not trying to hide anything.
I asked 3 questions. Why'd you put the tape on the doorbell camera? Why'd you cut the lights? And why didn't you wear the body cams? What are you trying to hide?
And Mr. Chairman, the reason that we called for the investigation is we're not trying to hide anything. The reason I'm not going to talk about what's going on in that investigation is to respect its independence and out of fairness. There's a reason for the Department of Justice policy that's existed for so many decades about not commenting on pending matters. It's not fair to people, and it risks the perception that people are trying to influence.
How about this one? Why'd you ignore the rules? Because don't the rules say you should only use a no-knock entrance into a property if it's the only way, if it's the absolute best way to do it? I mean, I could read from Ms. Monaco's directive. Limit the circumstances in which agents may seek to enter a dwelling pursuant to a warrant without complying with the knock and announce rule because of the risk posed to both law enforcement and civilians. So you want to limit this. Why'd you guys do it all in 57 seconds?
Respectfully, with respect to what I said before, is that we are not trying to hide anything. An independent agency is investigating it, and we, pursuant to longstanding policy, are not going to comment.
The Department of Justice has already told us you guys weren't wearing cameras. I'm just asking why.
For the cameras, our body-worn camera policy, I can talk about that. I think I can answer the question without talking about this case.
You can talk about some things relative to the investigation, but not others. We want all the answers to what's going on here.
I will tell you, with respect to the body-worn camera policy, the Department of Justice announced that policy when it was announced, as we have communicated to your staff and you. It was announced that it would be phased implementation. ATF is implementing that policy. We've implemented it in just under 1/3 of our field divisions. We have not received 3 separate requests for program funding from Congress to do so, but we are still doing it. I watched a hearing a couple of weeks ago where your fellow chairman...
Did the Little Rock police officers who accompanied you on this raid, did they wear body cams?
Again, not commenting on this specific case, but in general, the Department of Justice written policy allows local law enforcement on these types of operations, short-term operations, to follow their own guidelines and policies, if they wish, in body-worn cameras. And what I wanted to say is...
Their policy was to wear them. They weren't wearing them that day. We want to know why. Did you tell them not to wear them?
Mr. Chairman, again, it is simply unfair at this point while there's a pending investigation.
That's a simple question. We just want to know why they weren't following the rules. Their rules say wear body cameras. Your rules say wear body cameras. You weren't wearing body cameras. I go back to my original question. What were you trying to hide? We saw the video where you walked up and you put the tape on the doorbell. We know there were no lights to the foyer area. We have Mrs. Malinowski here who can testify to that. And we know you weren't wearing body cameras. What were you hiding?
Again, Mr. Chairman, we're not hiding anything. And with respect to the body-worn camera policy, the people there...
Why on the 12th did you not go and search the home? You were all circled up, ready to go, but a week before, on the 12th of March, you don't go, you go on the 19th. Why'd you decide not to go on the 12th?
Mr. Chairman, these operations, and by the way, we do about 11,000 operations each year. They're very dangerous operations. ATF doesn't do anything that is not dangerous. Well, it's not quite true, but many of them are very, very dangerous. And those operations are handled by people with decades of law enforcement experience. They plan them, they look at things.
Director, you got to admit, this is a little unique. You got a citizen, the highest paid official in the municipal government, Little Rock, Arkansas, making $260,000 a year, running the airport, no criminal background history, nothing, and he's dead at a pre-dawn raid when it sure looks like you could have served this search warrant when he wasn't there, but you decided not to. You decided to wait till he was home when you did it on March 19th. And as a result, Mr. Malinowski is no longer with us.
Well, first of all, let me just say this, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, any time that there's a loss of life, that is a profound incident. And of course, on behalf of just myself, ATF, and all law enforcement, we are very sorry when those things happen. Also, an agent was shot that day, and I'm sure you are sorry that that occurred also.
Of course, all the more reason to follow the no-knock warrant, not to have a no-knock warrant take place and follow the rules.
Mr. Chairman, as somebody who has worked with law enforcement for decades, there's a great temptation when a horrible incident happens to prejudge. Sometimes people even try to use it to advance agendas. The cops who are in the field and the family
I just want the answers. My time has expired.
Gentleman's time's expired. Now recognize Mr. Jordan from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, why was it so important that the virus not have started in a lab?
We don't know where it started, and that's the reason why I keep an open mind. So I don't know what you mean by why was it so important. It wasn't important.
Well, you still don't know where it started? The guys you gave money to figured it out in 3 days.
No.
Mr. Anderson said on January 31st, 2020, virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory. The very next day, Dr. Gary said, I don't know how this happens in nature. It'd be easy to do in a lab. And then 3 days later, Shazam, they switch and say it has to be nature. So they figured it out in 3 days, but you still don't know?
No, in fact, if you look at what they were saying, Congressman Jordan, they were saying that it was not a manufactured virus. It still could have evolved out of a lab.
Well, let me read something here to you.
They're not incompatible.
In our study on the censorship of the Biden administration working with big tech, I want to read you a WhatsApp message from Mark Zuckerberg. Can we include that the White House put pressure on us to censor the lab leak theory? So this is a communication on July 16th, 2021. Nick Clegg, Joel Kaplan, Sheryl Sandberg, Mark Zuckerberg. They're certainly feeling the pressure to downplay any lab leak theory and go with the natural origin theory.
Is there a question there?
One's coming. Here's another email to Mark Zuckerberg. It says, subject line, COVID misinformation, Wuhan lab leak theory. In response to continued public pressure and tense conversations with the new administration, we started removing 5 COVID claims, including the lab leak theory. Mr. Zuckerberg responds, this seems like a good reminder that when we compromise our standards due to pressure from an administration in either direction, we often later regret it. Why was it so important the virus not have started in a lab?
Wasn't so important that the virus not. We don't know. We know
it was important to someone in the Biden administration, so much so that the top people at Meta, the top people at Facebook are asking, why are we getting all this pressure to downplay the lab leak theory? And we have an email from June of the same year, June 4th, 2021, saying the same thing. It was certainly important to somebody.
Well, what has that got to do with me?
I'm asking you because you're the expert on the coronavirus. I'm saying why was the administration so pushing not to have the lab leak theory as something that was viable?
I can answer that. I've kept an open mind throughout the entire process.
You kept an open mind. Dr. Fauci, open mind.
That is correct.
What happened in those 3 days? Why did Dr. Anderson and Mr. Anderson and Dr. Gary, why did they change their mind in 180 degrees? Because what Christian Anderson says 3 days later, after he said virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory, 3 days later he says the main crackpot theories going around at the moment relate to this virus being somehow engineered, and that is demonstrably false. How did they figure all that out in 3 days, Dr. Fauci?
You can do that.
Still have an open mind.
Well, what they did is that they testified before this committee. What they did, they went back and looked at the sequences and realized that their initial concern was unfounded about that, and it did not look at all like it was manufactured. But as they said in their paper, even though they feel it was more likely—
3 days, they figured it out.
That's exactly. You could do that in 3 days. You can scan sequences in a day. You don't need 3 days.
Okay, who's Robert Redfield?
The former director of the CDC.
Dr. Redfield, right? And he was also on the coronavirus task force. Is that accurate?
He was a member of the coronavirus task force.
And here's what he said to this committee. He said, Redfield said that Fauci and Collins left him out because Redfield suspected that coronavirus had leaked from the Chinese lab. Is that accurate?
Well, he said that, but that's not true.
You're
That
saying
is incorrect, Congressman.
Dr. Redfield's lying to the committee
No.
when he sat right where you sat?
When he said that I kept him out, that is an incorrect statement. The roster who was on the phone
Was Dr. Redfield in that conference call on February 1st when you had Mr. Anderson and Dr. Gary on that call?
He was not. And the conference call was put together by Jeremy Farrar. So no one kept him out. He said he was kept out because he felt...
Did U.S. tax dollars...
You want me to answer the question?
Yeah, I would just wonder why he wasn't on the call. It seems to me the head of CDC, part of the coronavirus task force, which was formed 2 days prior to that call, would have been on the call.
Well, the call was arranged by Jeremy Farrar. You should ask him.
Okay. Did U.S. tax dollars flow through a grant recipient to the lab in China?
I'm sorry. What was...
Did U.S. tax dollars flow through a grant recipient to the lab in China?
Yes, of course. It was a subaward to the Wuhan Institute.
And who approved that award?
Excuse me?
And who approved that award? What agency approved that award?
National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Your agency approved that, right?
Yes, it did after...
Did that have anything to do with this downplaying of the lab leak theory?
No,
Nothing to do with it.
nothing.
What do you agree that there was a push to downplay the lab leak theory?
Not on my part.
Really?
Really.
Wow.
Wow.
I think most of the country would find that amazing. I still got 11 seconds.
But look at the facts. I've kept an open mind throughout the entire process.
All right, I yield back.
I now recognize the majority.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Garland, why Jack Smith? Why'd you pick him?
I've said at the time I appointed Mr. Smith, I explained he was independent. He was a longtime career prosecutor
But there are probably other people who you would describe as independent, long-time career prosecutor. Why did you pick, this is probably the most high-profile special counsel investigation, maybe in American history. You're going to be investigating a former president, a candidate for president, and leading in all the polls, and you pick Jack Smith, most important selection maybe ever made from Attorney General when you come to a special counsel. I just want to know why you could have picked
Well, I'm telling
former
you
AGs, deputy AGs, U.S. attorneys. You got all kinds of lawyers in this town, but you picked Jack Smith.
all the people you just mentioned would be political appointees. I appointed somebody who was not a political appointee, somebody who was independent, nonpartisan, with a record of career experience as a prosecutor. That seemed to me the perfect resume for making that kind of...
He was a guy, worked, had to bring him back from Europe. He worked at the ICC, worked at the World Court. He was the best pick for the most high-profile investigation ever.
He was independent. He was nonpartisan. He had never held a political office. He was never appointed in a political office.
Was he your first choice?
He had a long career as a career
Was he your
prosecutor.
first choice?
I'm not going to go into the questions.
Did you know him before you picked him?
I did not.
You never worked with him?
I did not.
Did you meet with him prior to announcing his selection and tell him what was going on?
Of course I did.
What happened in that meeting?
I met with him. I asked him if he would be willing to do this. We talked about my understandings of the role of this office, which are on the public record. That's all.
Did he ask for the job?
This is not a job I don't think anybody asks for. I'm sorry.
No, but that's not the question I asked you. I said, did Jack Smith ask
He
for
did
the job?
not ask me for the job, no.
Did he convey through someone else that he wanted the job?
I would be surprised if that were the case, but
Well, you don't know?
No, I don't know.
So he may have?
I can only tell you what I know. I chose him because he had a record of impartial career experience as a prosecutor. That's why he was chosen.
Was it impartial when he went after Governor McDonnell?
He was a member of
It was after Governor McDonnell. That case gets appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court unanimously said it was wrong and overturns the conviction?
He was in the public integrity section of the Justice Department, a career position. They made the decisions they thought were warranted, and we respect the decision of the Supreme Court.
Did the fact that he was interested in going after the very people who were targeted by the IRS about a decade ago, did that have any influence on your selection? Okay, let's put up this slide here. This is from Jack Smith to some other folks in the Justice Department, and it says, could we ever charge a conspiracy to violate laws of the U.S. for misuse of such nonprofits to get around existing campaign finance laws? Jack Smith was looking to prosecute the very people who were targeted by the Obama IRS.
I don't know. You have excerpts from an email I've never seen. You should know that I
IRS
sat...
Commissioner Sarah, I'm just asking, did this weigh into your decision? Did you know about this,
No,
what
no,
Jack Smith
I
was
don't
trying
know
to
if
do?
it's, I also don't know if it's true now.
IRS Commissioner Sarah Ingram oversees this from Jack Smith himself. Let's discuss tomorrow, but maybe we should try to set up a meeting this week. And here's the response. Here's the response. You didn't get your meeting with Miss Ingram from the IRS, but she's sending the head of the exempt organizations, Lois Lerner, who's known to us. So Jack Smith meeting with Lois Lerner, looking for ways to prosecute the very people who were victims of the Obama IRS. And I'm just asking, did that factor in your decision to name Jack Smith as special counsel?
I didn't have any idea about the things.
Didn't know about that.
No, and I don't know whether they're true now by looking at this.
Well, they're definitely true, but you didn't
should
know about it.
know-
But this guy was so important, you have to bring him from Europe back here to go after President Trump, name him as a special counsel. Do you regret the pick?
I'm sorry,
Do you regret picking him?
no, I do not regret picking him.
Well, prosecutors aren't supposed to tamper with evidence, and it looks like that's what he did. He changed the sequence of the documents that he seized from Mar-a-Lago.
I'm sorry, that's a false characterization, but that is ongoing.
Here's what he said to the court, Mr. Attorney General. There are some boxes where the order of items within the box is not the same as in the associated scans. I mean, he said it. I didn't say it. He told the court that.
Now you're asking me to comment on a discovery dispute that's ongoing in a court. I don't know the facts of it, and I'm not
No,
going to comment on it.
this is from Jack Smith filing with the court. He admitted to the court that they tampered with the evidence. He mishandled the very documents he's charging President Trump with mishandling. And I'm just asking, do you regret picking this guy as the special counsel in the most important special counsel investigation probably in American history?
I'm sorry, I did not hear the words tamper in the statement that Mr. Smith filed. He did not use those words.
Well, let me ask it this way. Are you supposed to change the order of the documents that you seize and the physical documents don't match up with the scanned documents? Are you supposed to do that as a prosecutor?
This is a matter in dispute, in discovery, in that court, and I'm going to leave it for the district court to make a determination. After
I would just say one last
district
thing.
court makes
It's
a
not in
determination-
dispute. This is what he said in the court filing. Jack Smith's team said that to the judge in the court. By the way, this case is now basically on hold because they've screwed up so many things.
Again, I don't know whether your description of the facts are true or not true, and I'm not going to intrude in a decision in a district court.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Attorney General,
Is recognized for unanimous consent request.
Mr. Chairman, I have an article dated May 6, 2024 called Day C Crime Facts without objection,
Without objection.
and a Vanderbilt Law Review article titled Corruption of a Term, the Problematic Nature of 18 U.S.C. 1512C, the Federal Obstruction of Justice Power Provision.
Thank you. Without objection. Thank you, gentlemen. Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney General, I want to go back to the Mr. Colangelo questions that I didn't quite get answers with. Is it true that Mr. Matthew Colangelo, who was at one point the third highest ranking official at the DOJ, joined Bragg's DA office in New York before the Trump prosecution? Do I have that right?
I don't know anything other than it's on the public record. He was the principal deputy to the Associate Attorney General, and he joined the case in New York. I don't know how it related timeline to the prosecution.
Has anyone from the department, your department, been in touch with Mr. Colangelo or ever discussed any of the case about President Trump since he left?
Look, we have 115,000 people in the department. I can speak for myself. I have not had any communications with Mr. Colangelo.
So you don't know if anyone in the department has?
As I said, there's 115,000, and I don't know what they've talked about.
So if I asked for further information and sent you a letter, could I get some of these questions answered? I've asked for correspondence. I sent a letter back in April and haven't received a response. You said in your testimony that you've gone to extraordinary lengths to get Congress information they request.
Yeah, look, I'm in favor of transparency because I believe it will show that these allegations about some kind of control or collusion between the department and the independent Manhattan office are not true.
So then would you...
We'll take back your letter and we'll try to get a response to you.
To kind of follow up with what Mr. Gates said earlier this morning, will you commit to releasing any communications between your department and the local DA offices in New York or Atlanta with respect to these Trump trials?
I'm going to commit to look, I would like transparency on this matter. In the normal course, if you submit your letter, our Office of Legislative Affairs will get a response to you.
Because I think one of the problems here is we hear you criticize some of us for being critical and accusing you all of a two-tier justice system. We use the term weaponization of government, but then when we ask you all for information, you tell us we can't have it, or you've decided that we shouldn't have it. So it's difficult when you criticize us, but we don't get the information we're asking for.
I'm not criticizing you, and in fact, we produced 92,000 pages of documents in response to hundreds of requests.
You've
from
called
you.
some of the things we've said conspiracy theories. I won't read back your testimony to you, but I've printed it since your office posted it online this morning. And I would just ask you to work with us because it's difficult for us to tamper down some of these claims that you say we're making when we don't get the information we request from you all. I'll yield.
That's fair. I'd be happy to work with you to tamper this down.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, we'll tamper away if we can get the information we're asking. I'll yield
I
back to
assume
you.
that's a verb. I'm with it.
That's right. Thank you. Mr. Jordan, I'll yield to you.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. I'm going to go back to where I was, Mr. Attorney General, a few minutes ago. I want to read from this Politico's news story from 1 week ago today. I just want to read two sentences, it's the first two sentences in the article. The Justice Department has agreed to settle a long-running litigation stemming from a decision in 2017 to release to the media text messages between two former FBI employees involved in the probe of Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Next sentence, in a notice filed with two federal judges in Washington on Tuesday, the Justice Department said it had reached settlements of legal claims that fired FBI agent Peter Strzok and former FBI attorney Lisa Page brought in 2019, alleging that the disclosure violated their privacy. So again, I just want to be clear that the department is getting ready to pay Peter Strzok and Lisa Page some money. Is that accurate?
I wasn't aware that we'd announced it. All I can say is we reached settlements based on our litigators' assessment of whether we can win the case and how much it will cost if we lose the case. That's the way we decide on reaching settlements.
Just to be clear, the guy who texted Peter Strzok, who was involved in the spying on President Trump's campaign, who was then involved, worked on the Mueller investigative team, and sent this text message to Lisa Page, just went to a Southern Virginia Walmart. I could smell, in all capitals, I could smell the Trump support. That guy's going to get tax dollars from the American people?
That case is he brought a case under the Privacy Act. The question is, did the Justice Department violate the Privacy Act?
Lisa Page said this in a text message to Peter Strzok. Trump's not ever going to become president, right? With a question mark. Peter Strzok's response, no, he's not. We'll stop it. And these two individuals are going to get a windfall of money from the American taxpayers because you decided that's the right thing to do?
The Privacy Act doesn't distinguish between people we like and people we don't like, information we like and information we don't like. If somebody in the government discloses personal information protected by the Privacy Act, that's the way the law is.
Jeepers, you can go after a president and you get rewarded for doing so, according to the Justice Department.
It's not a question of reward, it's a question of the government paying for violating the law.
They're going to get a lot of money, and I know that this is what they said. We know what they were up to. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Vermont.
Time to the chairman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Is the Department of Justice retaliating against whistleblowers?
No, that would be a violation of statute and a violation of
The
our...
Inspector General seems to think you are. I got this Management Advisory Memorandum dated May 2024, notification of concerns regarding the Department of Justice compliance with whistleblower protections for employees with a security clearance.
I've read the management memo. I think it's a good memo. It doesn't say we've been retaliated against anybody. It says that there have to be additional protections with respect.
Is it just pure coincidence that Marcus Allen's security clearance got reinstated today? Whistleblower came in front of this committee. Democrats disparaged this guy, called him conspiracy theorist. 27 months without his security clearance, and we find out today it's been reinstated?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know about the facts, anything about the facts of that case. Retaliation against whistleblowers is against the law, and it will be punished.
3 people who've come and talked to this committee as whistleblowers have had their security clearance taken. Marcus Allen gets his security clearance put back in place today. And the Inspector General says he's got concerns, doing an investigation as we speak about what's going on.
I'm sorry, the management memo that you're talking about does not conclude there was any retaliation against
No,
anybody.
he's putting you on notice that he's investigating.
Mr. Chairman, regular order.
The gentleman From California's recognized. Committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of the Department of Justice. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair is now recognized for an opening statement. Justice is no longer blind in America. Today it's driven by politics. Example number one is President Trump. Bonnie Willis opens an investigation into President Trump in February of 2021, but doesn't bring charges until after he announces he's running for president. Alvin Bragg said, quote, "I could not see a world in which I would indict Trump and call Mr. Cohen as a prosecution witness." But that's exactly what he did after President Trump announced he was running for president. And the Attorney General names Jack Smith, special counsel, 3 days after President Trump announces he's running for president. 4 months earlier, before Jack Smith is named as special counsel, the Biden Justice Department, under Attorney General Garland, approved a raid on President Trump's home, something we've never witnessed in this great country. This action broke every norm in our justice system. Don't take my word for it. Former assistant director in charge of the Washington field office of the FBI, Stephen D'Antuono, said this in his deposition to our committee. 4 standard processes were not followed. The Washington field office ran that raid, not the Miami field office. The operation was run out of headquarters, excuse me, not from an assigned U.S. attorney's office, as is customary. The FBI didn't seek consent before doing the raid, and the FBI refused to wait for President Trump's attorneys to be present before the search was conducted. And there's Jay Bratt. Mr. Bratt's on the special counsel team. He met with Biden White House officials multiple times, including just weeks before Jack Smith indicts former President Trump. But what's most troubling is what Mr. Bratt did to Stanley Woodward. Mr. Woodward represents one of the defendants in the documents case. He was summoned by Mr. Bratt to department headquarters. At the meeting, Mr. Bratt informed Stanley Woodward, if your guy flips, if your client changes, it could help your chances for that judgeship you are interested in. Unbelievable. And of course, there's the fact that Jack Smith changed the sequence of the documents he seized in the raid of the president's home. Had to file this with the judge and with the court. The physical documents don't match the scanned documents. Many people call this tampering with evidence. Jack Smith mishandled the very documents he charged President Trump with mishandling. Remember what Special Counsel Hur found. On page 1 of his report, he said this: President Biden knowingly kept classified information. President Biden knowingly disclosed classified information. And then on page 231, he told us why President Biden did it. Page 231, quote, Joe Biden had strong motivations for ignoring the procedures for classified information because he was writing a book for which he got paid $8 million. President Trump gets charged for allegedly mishandling documents, but Jack Smith can mishandle documents, no problem. Joe Biden can mishandle documents, no problem. Never forget, this is the same Department of Justice who made David Weiss the special counsel in the Hunter Biden case. After Mr. Weiss spent 4.5 years investigating President Biden's son and had the sweetheart deal he took to the court laughed out of court, he gets named special counsel. This is the same Department of Justice whose Civil Rights Division has done nothing to address the attacks on Jewish students at college campuses. This is the same Department of Justice who can't tell us who planted the pipe bombs on January 6th, who leaked the Dobbs draft opinion, and who put cocaine in the White House. And this is the same Department of Justice who told us in a memo from the Attorney General himself that moms and dads at school board meetings should be investigated. Same Department of Justice who said pro-life Catholics are extremists. The same Department of Justice who censored Americans. And the same Department of Justice who retaliated against whistleblowers who came to this committee and told us about these wrongdoings. So, Mr. Garland, we're glad you're here today. We've got lots of questions. Many Americans believe there's now a double standard in our justice system. They believe that because there is. And we're going to have lots of questions about that problem. With that, I yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.
Chair Jim Jordan.
Thank you, Mark. Last September, the Speaker of the House announced that the House of Representatives would be entering an impeachment inquiry phase of our oversight work. On December 13th, the full House of Representatives voted to do just that, to formalize that. This is a power that is exclusively resides in the House of Representatives, and one of the most important powers that we have as an institution and as a body. Robert Hur, on page 1 of his special counsel report, said Joe Biden knowingly kept classified information, Joe Biden knowingly disclosed classified information, and he disclosed that information to someone who wasn't allowed to get it. On page 231, he told us why Joe Biden did those things. He said Joe Biden had strong motivations for ignoring classified procedures because he was writing a book for which he got paid $8 million. So we have motive, an $8 million motive. We have the elements of the crime, knowingly keeping, knowingly disclosing, giving that information to someone who wasn't allowed to get it. We have all that, and yet the special counsel said he would not recommend charges for President Biden. We think we're entitled to, we know we're entitled to all the evidence, and that includes the best evidence, which is this audio tape. That's why we sent the subpoena. The Attorney General has been clear he's not going to give that information to us. So that's why we have the contempt resolution. We assume this is going to wind up in court, but we think our case is strong and we think that we will prevail. But step one is to pass the resolution holding the Attorney General in contempt for not giving the House of Representatives, the body who's in an impeachment inquiry phase of our oversight responsibilities, not giving us the best evidence. Finally, I would just say this. We think the privilege has already been waived. We think when they gave us the transcript, they've waived the privilege. And understand that there have already been times where the transcript that we've received from the White House doesn't match up with what was actually said by the President of the United States. And so, again, for all those reasons, we think we need this information, and that's why the resolution will be on the floor today. And I'll let the next gentleman talk about the vote on that, and that's our good whip, Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Jim. As Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, were you guessing or lying? The day after President Trump is shot, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said, quote, "The assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false." The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said, "That is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any request for additional security measures that were rebuffed." But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this: "Top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel." The next day, the New York Times said this: "Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail." So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied. As far as requests...
Well, maybe they got tired of asking. Maybe you turned them down so darn much, they said, not worth asking. How many times did you turn them down ahead of that?
I think that it is important to distinguish between what some people may view as a denial of an asset or a request.
Well, is Mr. Guglielmi your spokesperson? He said he acknowledged the Secret Service had turned down some requests. I'm asking how many?
A denial of a request does not equal a vulnerability.
Well, tell me what it is.
There are a number of ways that threats and risks can be mitigated with a number of different assets, whether that be through personnel, whether that be through technology, or other resources.
Well, tell the committee which it was. They asked for additional help in some form or another. You told them no. How many times did you tell them no, and what did you tell them no to?
Again, I cannot speak to specific incidents, but I can tell you in general terms, the Secret Service is judicious with their resources based on...
What does some requests mean? How many times?
Some indicate request is plural. So more than once they asked for additional help and you turned them down. What did they ask for and how many times did you turn them down? Pretty basic questions.
So again, without having all of the details in front of me, sir, what I can tell you is that there are times—
You didn't get briefed on how many times you turned down the Trump detail when they asked for additional help?
I'm sorry.
You didn't get briefed on that before you came to this hearing, knowing you were going to get asked that question?
What I can tell you is that in generic terms, when details make a request, there are times that there are alternate ways to cover off on that threat or that risk.
But that's not what he said. He said they were denied certain requests, some requests. This is your spokesperson, not me talking. This is the Secret Service talking. And what a change from absolutely false, unequivocally false to, oh, by the way, there were some times where we didn't give them what they wanted. That's a huge change in 5 days. And the fact that you can't answer how many times you did that, that's pretty darn frustrating, not just for me, but for the country.
I hear your frustration.
Let me ask you this. Were any of those requests denied to President Trump's detail after you knew about the Iranian threat?
What I can tell you, again, I don't know the specifics, is that there are times when we can fill a request. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a Secret Service asset or resource. We can fill that request with locally available assets.
You spoke to anyone at the White House since July 13th?
Yes, I have.
Who'd you talk to?
I have briefed the President and the Vice President.
Talked to the First Lady?
No, I have not.
Talked to the White House staff? Anyone in the White House communications?
No, I have not.
Have you talked to the counter sniper who took the shot that took out the bad guy?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that conversation?
I would not want to reveal conversations that I've had with my employees.
But that's exactly the kind of information the American people want to know. American people who pay your salary.
I understand. This is an ongoing investigation, and
Who's all doing the investigating at Secret Service? I know the Inspector General, but is there also an internal investigation in addition to the Inspector General?
We are conducting a mission assurance investigation internally, yes.
You know what it looks like, Director? It looks like you won't answer some pretty basic questions. It looks like you got a 9% raise and you cut corners when it came to protecting one of the most important individuals, most well-known individuals on the planet. A former president, likely the guy who's going to be the next president. Looks like you guys were cutting corners. That's what it looks like to me. Is that true?
I am here today because I want to answer questions, but I also want to be cautious.
You might want to, but you haven't answered, I don't think you've answered one question from the chairman, the ranking member, or me. Well, we got a lot of other people asking. We'll see if your record improves, but right now you haven't answered, I don't think, any questions. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Director, let me go back to where Mr. Bishop was. Tell me about the drone. You act like you wanted to fill us in on that. Fill us in.
So we have recovered a drone that the shooter appears to have used. It's being exploited and analyzed by the FBI lab. The drone was recovered in his vehicle. So at the time of the shooting, the drone was in his vehicle with the controller. In addition, our investigation has uncovered—
Do you know what time of day he flew it, and if he flew it on the day of the shot?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So in addition, it appears that around 3:50 p.m., 4 o'clock in that window, on the day of the shooting, that the shooter was flying the drone around the area for about 11 minutes. I want to be clear, but when I say the area, not over the stage and that part of the area itself, but I would say about 200 yards, give or take, away from that. We think, but we do not know. So again, this is one of these things that's qualified because of our ongoing review, that he was live streaming, viewing the footage from that, again, about 11 minutes in around the 3:50, 4 o'clock p.m. range.
2 hours before, he's flying a drone in the vicinity of the route.
About 200 yards away, yes.
200 yards. Okay, that's important information. What about the bombs that we've heard about in the shooter's car?
So again, the FBI lab is exploiting those explosive devices. Yep. We've recovered 3 devices, 2 in his vehicle and 1 back in his residence.
Are these what you would call, your experts would call, sophisticated operations, or this? I don't know. That's what I've been told by people who have some understanding of this area.
Yeah, I think it's. We've seen more sophisticated and less. I would say these are relatively, again, keyword relatively crude devices themselves, but they did have the ability to be detonated remotely. And so to that point, in addition to the 2 devices that we recovered out of his vehicle, there were receivers for those two explosive devices with the devices, and then on the shooter himself, when he was killed by law enforcement, he had a transmitter with him. Now, I do want to add one important point here, is at the moment, it looks to us, again, ongoing review, and I can't say that too many times, at a moment, it looks like because of the on-off position on the receivers, that if he had tried to detonate those devices from the roof, it would not have worked. But that doesn't mean the explosives weren't dangerous.
And I'm sure we're going to get into all these subjects a little bit later as well. Tell us what you can about the encrypted platforms we've heard about.
So one of the things that we're drilling into hard with the shooter in an effort to try to learn more about his state of mind, his motive, his ideology, his context, everything else, is to look at all of his devices, any social media accounts he had, et cetera. And one of the things we've learned in finally getting into his phone, which was also a significant technical challenge from an encryption perspective, but in addition, once we got on the phone, it turned out he was using some encrypted messaging application.
And again, the same question relative to the bombs. Was this pretty sophisticated, or is this is the kind of the norm you see with folks like, similar situation? How would you describe it?
On this subject, I would say this has unfortunately now become very commonplace, and it's a real challenge for not just the FBI, but state and local law enforcement all over the state.
Tell me exactly the scope of, does the scope of your investigation include what I call that critical 5 minutes from when the 6:09, when this is based, I think, on information you've given to Congress, 6:09 when the shooter's identified on the roof, and 6:14 when President Trump is ultimately escorted off, and all that happens, the shots that take place in between there. Do you have access to the communications that were going on at the time in that critical 5 minutes?
So our investigation, when you say scope, our investigation includes that time frame, although focused again on the shooter himself and his day.
Now, as involved in that, he's obviously involved in that time frame.
Correct, and as part of that, as part of our focus, our investigation of the shooter and the attack, of course, we are interviewing law enforcement from the scene because those are some of the most significant witnesses, and we're obviously getting access to their materials and that kind of thing, and the Secret Service has been fully cooperative.
You have access to the communications that exist there?
That exact question, I don't, as I sit here at the moment, I don't know the exact answer to that question, but I know that Secret Service has been cooperative with us.
The Congress would like access to those communications as well. I mean, not just that 5 minutes, although I think that's the critical time frame. There's lots of communications we'd love to have access as well. I see my time is up, and they have called votes on the floor. I think there are about 6 minutes. Director, that's an important question, though, because you've talked to the counter sniper, and that I mentioned this in our opening statement. That critical 5 minutes from 6:09 to 6:14, and what takes place there is critical, and I think that's what the gentleman was getting at. And we were hopeful that you could tell us something about your interview with the counter sniper.
Yeah, I guess I want to distinguish a couple things. There is some individual, not law enforcement, I believe, who spotted the shooter on the roof a few minutes before. But I think law enforcement spotting him with the weapon on the roof is seconds before the shot.
Okay, so that's important.
Yeah, so I think there's two different things going on.
I think what you're saying is it wasn't maybe that if the bad guy shoots at 6:11, then you're saying this encounter with local law enforcement that Mr. Bentz was just getting into happened just seconds before that and maybe not 2 minutes before that?
That's my understanding. That, in other words, that there's different things here. There's an individual, at least one individual I can think of, not law enforcement, member of the public, who observed him on the roof. Not clear whether or not the individual saw a weapon or not, but saw him in a way that was concerning. That is some number of, not many, but like just a handful of minutes. I think separate from that, as far as law enforcement goes, in terms of a weapon, this local officer that we just talked about observed the individual, again, literally just seconds before the shooter took his shots. Separate and apart from all of that, roughly, I think, maybe a little less than or around an hour before the shooting, there were local law enforcement officers who observed the shooter, not up on the roof, not with a weapon, with a, I believe, a rangefinder, kind of like you would use if you were playing golf or something, in a way that was odd and suspicious. So that started happening with local law enforcement beforehand. But in terms of shooter, meaning with the weapon, law enforcement, my understanding is that the first time that happened was this local officer climbing up on the roof seconds before the
Again,
shooting.
we want that timeline. I think the committee wants that timeline and communications that were taking place in that short period of time.
Again, as I've said with everything else, I really want to be careful. I'm leaning in, trying to share as much as I can here. Facts are evolving, things may change, but we are working on a timeline, among other things.
Committee will stand in recess until after the Prime Minister's remarks conclude. Chair will recognize himself for an opening statement. July 13th was a terrible day for America. We all agree spirited debate, fighting for what you believe in, are part of what makes this country the greatest nation in the world. But the First Amendment and robust political debate are not consistent in any way with violence. What happened in Butler, Pennsylvania was a tragedy that took the life of a good man, Corey Compratore, leaving a wife without a husband and 2 daughters without a father. Others were injured, and of course, former President Trump, by the grace of God, survived the assassination attempt. There are a lot of unanswered questions about the security failures that day. Questions about decisions made before the rally, questions about actions during the rally, and questions about statements made after the event concluded. Prior to the rally, why was the president's security detail denied requests for extra resources? Why weren't all the buildings secured? There were a finite number of buildings that needed to be secured. Why wasn't that done? Why was the president allowed to walk out on the stage when there was a suspicious person on the property? During the rally, what exactly happened between 6:09 and 6:14, those critical 5 minutes? We know from briefings from the director and the deputy director at the FBI and other information we've gathered that at 6:09, the shooter was identified on the roof. At 6:10, the counter sniper was notified. Counter sniper teams were notified about the shooter. 6:11, the shooter fired several shots, injuring and killing one person, injuring others. At 6:12, the counter sniper took down the shooter, and at 6:14, President Trump was escorted off the stage by Secret Service agents. We need to know what happened play by play, moment by moment, second by second, the communications that took place, again, during that critical 5 minutes. And then finally, after the rally, why did both the Secret Service and Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, lie to the American people? July 14th, the day after the attack, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said this, quote, "The assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false." The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said, "That is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any requests for additional security measures that were rebuffed." But 5 days later, top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel. And on the 21st of July, the New York Times, confirming what the Washington Post reported, said, quote, "Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail." 180-degree change. Why did they initially lie to us in the days after the attack in Pennsylvania? Finally, we hope to learn more today from Director Wray about the shooter, his use of the drone, the explosives that were in his car, how he got on the roof, and a host of other questions. It is our hope that Director Wray's testimony can begin to give answers to the American people about all of these questions and concerns. So, Director, we appreciate you being here, and we trust that you're going to be as transparent with the committee and the country as you possibly can. And I'm sure you understand that a significant portion of the country has a healthy skepticism regarding the FBI's ability to conduct a fair, honest, open, and transparent investigation. And that skepticism is based on what they've witnessed over the past several years. The American people have seen a Biden-Harris Justice Department that can't tell us who planted the pipe bombs on January 6th, that can't tell us who leaked the Dobbs opinion, and that can't tell us who put cocaine at the White House. A Biden-Harris Justice Department who raided President Trump's home, Biden-Harris Justice Department who worked with social media companies to censor Americans, Biden-Harris Justice Department who let the country believe that the Hunter Biden laptop was misinformation, when they knew at the time it was authentic, and maybe most importantly, a Biden-Harris Justice Department who retaliated against whistleblowers who came to this committee and spoke to us about these issues. Last week, we sent you 12 questions about what occurred on July 13th. We expect you to answer those questions and the others that I've just outlined. And again, we thank you for being here today and appreciate your willingness to answer the questions that the committee is going to have. And with that, I would yield to the ranking member for an opening statement. Director, I'm still not clear in my mind. When did the counter snipers, the good guys, when did they first get eyes on the bad guy, the would-be assassin, on the roof of the AGR building?
I'm not certain, but I'll take my best effort here.
I guess I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
Did they have eyes on him before the local law enforcement was looking up on the roof and engaged with the bad guy shooter?
I don't know the answer to that. I will look into that and get back to you. I believe we have the answer. I just don't know that I have it. I want to make sure I answer accurately.
Because we thought, from the briefings that Mr. Abate gave us, or Abate gave us, excuse me, Abate gave us, and the briefings you gave the Congress, that they did, but it wasn't clear from your testimony. So if you can get that answer to us, that would be helpful. I want to circle back just a third time, if I could, to the Iranian threat to President Trump and some others, former members of our government. The reason I want to go back to that, because we now know that the Secret Service and Homeland Security denied resources to President Trump's detail that they had asked for. And it seems to me, if that all happened after you guys knew about the Iran threat and had briefed the Secret Service on that real threat, that's an even bigger problem. And that's why I was trying to get that timeline down, when you knew about it and when you briefed the Secret Service on the Iranians' threat to kill President Trump.
So again, I really want to be careful to both be accurate, but also not to kind of stray into any kind of classified information or confirm the existence of classified information. So let me see if there's a way for us to get back to you on that question. I understand why you're asking. It may be easier to answer than I think, but at the moment, in an open hearing, I'm not sure if I can see the right way to do that.
Fair enough. We'll expect answers to both of those questions, and you can get back to this. That'd be great. Finally, anything else you want to tell us that we didn't ask? I mean, you came today and you told us some things that weren't even prompted by questions, and I just want to make sure if there's anything else you want to tell us regarding July 13th and what you've discovered. Now's the time.
Well, again, we're going to continue to engage with the Congress. I think we've covered a lot of the points that I really wanted to make sure that I got across on, just as I'm looking at my list. In one way or another, through the course of today's questioning, I think we've gotten through most of it.
That concludes today's hearing. We thank our witness for appearing before the committee today. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witness or additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr.
How many separate times was the shooter on the premises?
So again, with the caveat that we're continuing to do work on it, we believe that the first time he traveled to the grounds was, I think, a week before, and he spent roughly 20 minutes there. Then he went to the grounds again on the morning of the event, it appears, for about 70 minutes, I think, but again, I qualify that. I'd have to go back and look to be sure of that part. And then he came back in the afternoon, so that would be, I guess, a third time for good, but that included things like this drone activity we just talked about.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
The gentleman yields back. At this time, I acknowledge that the gentleman from South Dakota. Oh, sorry about that.
I'm from South Dakota.
The gentleman from North Dakota, Mr. Armstrong, would like to be waived on without objection. Seeing none. Okay. Chair now recognizes for his 5 minutes of questions the gentleman from the chairman of the entire committee, from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
I thank the chairman. Director, how many federal inmates were released to home confinement under the CARES Act
We had about 35,000 released under the CARES Act.
35,000?
Oh, excuse me, 35,000 is the number under FSA earned time credits. Under CARES Act, it was 13,000.
13, that's what I thought.
13,204.
13,000. On February 4th, 2023, Jason Galanis, after serving approximately 40% of his sentence, applied for home confinement. Very next month, the probation office approved that. You're familiar with that, right? Also, the very next month, March of 2023, the Pensacola warden approved. And then on June 9th, the Residential Reentry Management Center also approved Mr. Galanis for home confinement under the CARES Act. But then, 4 days later, the Board of Prisons denied it. Who made the decision to deny that?
The denial came out of the Residential Reentry Management Office.
After they approved it, 4 days later, they changed their mind?
So the chair and I spoke yesterday. I think there's some confusion around approvals and referrals. The warden has the ability to refer. Probation has the requirement to confirm that his housing option in the community is proper. That still doesn't approve a home confinement placement. The final decision rests with the Residential Reentry Management Office.
And they told Mr. Galanis on the 9th that everything was fine. And then on the 13th, they changed. Why?
That is not my understanding. The Residential Reentry Management Office did a thorough review of his case and concluded that he was, for a variety of indicators, would not be a good candidate for home confinement.
The Residential Reentry Management Center on June 9th approved Mr. Galanis' request for home confinement and then reached out to the Southern District of New York where he was prosecuted. Is that what happened?
That's not my understanding. My understanding is since he had more than 5 years on his sentence, it was practice for the Residential Reentry Management Office to reach out to the U.S.
Anyone else get CARES Act release and home confinement under the CARES Act who had more than 5 years left on their sentence?
I can't answer that question.
I can. David
definitively,
McMaster
but I
did.
can tell
David
you.
McMaster did. In sentence for fraud, similar to Mr. Galanis, had a 188-month sentence and was given home confinement under the CARES Act.
We look at each case individually. I am confident that
Okay,
Mr.
so
Galanis'
this is what I'm getting at. What was the reason, whether it was an approval then a denial, what was the reason for the denial?
So it was a handful of reasons, and we look at the totality of the circumstances when we make
When you
these
say
decisions.
we, who ultimately makes the decisions? Does that rest with you?
No, sir. I do not review these.
Can you overrule it?
This is the residential.
Can you overrule what happens at the Residential Reentry Management Center?
I have never overruled one of their decisions.
Never. Okay. Then what were the factors that made this determination?
So the factors included the fact that in a previous incarceration cycle, he violated the conditions of his supervised release by texting a potential witness, and his bond was ultimately revoked. His role in the instant offense as a leader and organizer was outlined in the pre-sentencing report. As was mentioned earlier, he owed over $80 million in restitution. He had more than 10 victims and more than 5 years left
How many
on
were
his
turned down?
sentence.
The people who applied under the CARES Act, you gave approval to 13,204. How many were denied?
I don't have that number, but we're happy to look into it and get it back.
Is it a big number? Is it a small number? What's the number?
You know, Congressman, I wouldn't venture a guess under oath. I will tell you that towards the end of CARES Act, the number of requests that came in, I'm told, tripled as the population learned that the CARES Act was expiring. So I know at the time of his request, the numbers were very high.
Did the fact that the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed Mr. Galanis' business partner have any weight on the decision to deny his request?
No.
You're confident of that?
I have no evidence to suggest that the Residential Reentry Management Office would have taken that into consideration. That would have been outside BOP policy.
Because June 9th, they basically told him, okay, it looks good. June 13th, they deny it. Anything happened in between there that could have influenced the decision?
Not that I am aware of.
Well, that's when the subpoena was sent to his business partner on June 12th. We actually think that probably had some impact on the decision to deny his request. Given that other people, similar crime, similar sentence, were in fact approved, like Mr. McMaster. And you're saying that had nothing to do with it?
Correct.
And you don't know how many were turned down?
No, but happy to find that number and get it back to you.
Were I mean, Mr. Galanis is nonviolent. his crime's nonviolent. Any people who were in for a violent offense were then given release under the CARES Act?
Congressman, I am confident that Mr. Galanis's case was handled within existing BOP policy, and I am aware that any part of his application was denied other than the merits that I just described to you.
Okay. Well, the timeline doesn't seem to add up to what you just described there. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the chairman of the full committee, the gentleman from Ohio, for 5 minutes. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, who's Kevin Rojek?
I'm sorry, sir, could you say?
Kevin Rojek, R-O-J-E-K?
I'm sorry, sir, I don't recognize the name.
Well, he's the special agent in charge at the FBI Pittsburgh office looking into the assassination attempt on President Trump. Took place in Butler, Pennsylvania. My understanding is HSI had a number of agents at Butler at that particular day. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, that's correct. We had 16 agents, special agents assigned to the Butler farm
You had
rally.
16 of your people there.
16, 1-6.
Do you know how many Secret Service agents were there that day?
No, sir, I don't.
But you had 16 of your agents supplementing and helping with the security of President Trump on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania.
We provided support to Secret Service as collateral law enforcement support. We were not in a position where we were directly protecting the principal. We would never, as HSI agents, be assigned to that position.
But you were helping out that day.
Yes, sir.
And the guy who's doing the investigation, looking into what took place, where President Trump was hit by a bullet from the assassin, another American was killed, 2 other Americans were injured. The guy who was in charge of that investigation has not talked to you, even though 16 of your agents were there that day?
No, sir.
You don't even know Kevin Rojek, never heard of him?
I haven't. I can tell you that Monday, after the assassination attempt in West Palm Beach, I reached out to Acting Deputy Director Vince Tutoni, who was in West Palm or the vicinity at the time, had gone down. I did speak to him on Monday to further.
You reached out?
I reached out to him, sir.
Do you know who Jeffrey Veltri is?
No, sir.
Okay, he's the guy in Miami who works for the FBI who's overseeing what took place Sunday, the second assassination attempt on President Trump. You have not talked to him?
No, sir.
But you have actively reached out. And who's the individual you spoke to in Miami? He works for HSI?
No, Vince Tutoni. He's the Acting Deputy Director for Secret Service.
For Secret Service, okay.
I will say, if I may, certainly with an incident like this, they are certainly very busy. I did not take any offense that they did not reach out to me.
Even though it's been 2 months? I mean, since the guy in Butler, that's 2 months ago, and the guy running the investigation has not reached out to the individual in charge of the 16 agents who were there who were supposed to be helping supplement the protection of the president, or former president?
It's something, our support to Secret Service is something ongoing that we do all the time. It's baked into our mission. We've done this historically.
Do you have agents in Miami on Sunday working on President Trump's detail or helping supplement his Secret Service detail?
Yes, sir. We had 4.
You had 4?
We had 4. 2 were on shift and 2 were on shift, not in the immediate vicinity. 2 were not on shift at the time of the
So you had agents at both of the assassination attempts on the former president, and the individuals at the FBI conducting the investigations have not talked to you. In one case, that's been over 2 months ago.
Correct.
That's your testimony today. Is that accurate?
Correct.
I find that troubling. I find that troubling. Let's switch here for a second. What type of training do your agents receive before they, well, let me ask this. How long has HSI been supplementing the Secret Service and giving agents to help the Secret Service in their duties?
Sir, thank you for that question. Certainly back to our time when we were U.S. Customs Service agents with Secret Service under the Department of Treasury. I don't have the exact date, but this is historically something that we have supported Secret Service. I personally...
Fairly common, you're
yes.
saying. Okay, and is it common to have like that many agents at an event with the former president? Like, was that unusual, or is 16 kind of normal, or do you sometimes have more, sometimes... What's kind of normal?
It varies based on the need and the situation.
Is it ongoing? Does President Trump always have some HSI people with him now when he's traveling, or even it looks like when he's at his residence in Florida?
We provide support to Secret Service, and then they assign our personnel as needed.
Okay, okay. Madam Chair, I just find it, I find it kind of astonishing that the people doing the investigation haven't talked to the individual who's in charge of so many of these agents who've been supplementing
President Trump's security detail. Maybe that's why it's good that in the case of what happened on Sunday, Governor DeSantis is actually doing his own investigation. Maybe that'll be done a little bit better. With that, I yield back to the chairman of the committee.
Will you yield me just a moment?
Yeah, you got the last.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, my question is, the UN General Assembly is going this week and next week. You have HSI agents supporting protective duty there as well?
I'm sorry, for UNGA, for
For
UN
UNGA,
General
yes.
Assembly? General Assembly? Yes, sir, we do. We have around 1,200 agents supporting the UN General Assembly.
1,200. And what is that? What percentage of the entire complement of agents that you have is supporting UNGA right now?
We have around, my math isn't great, around 7,000, 7,600 agents. So we have about 1,200 supporting UNGA.
So it's about 18%, something like that, maybe?
It's a significant number of agents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, for those well-said words. Mr. Horowitz, did you ever request permission from the Deputy Attorney General to investigate attorney misconduct in Special Counsel David Weiss's office?
I have not, at this point, asked for that authority. As we've engaged on this issue in the past, it's, first of all, not clear whether we have that authority. I'd have to have that discussion. But secondly, while the prosecution was ongoing, it was my view, consistent with our policy and practice, to let that prosecution play out. And then...
Do you have concerns?
I think there have been a number of legitimate concerns raised, yes, Congressman.
Your time has expired.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes